Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. First week of the month, which means it's request week here at the Metal Exchange. And you are about to watch me botch German for the next hour or so. But before we talk about Rammstein and their 2001 release, Mutter, what's going on, my friend? How are you, and how's your German coming along?
Not so hot. You had suggested that we do the whole episode in German. That would have been pretty horrible. So I'm glad we axed that option. But this was really interesting. Thanks to our friend Keith for requesting this, and actually requesting something that he enjoys and everybody else probably has the potential to enjoy. So yeah, this is a far cry from Saint Anger, I will say. But this was my first time really listening to a Rammstein album start to finish, and so it was really, really interesting. And like we kind of briefly mentioned at the end of last week's episode, we're kind of working with 2 or 3 songs in our knowledge base from this band prior to listening to this album. So there's probably going to be a lot of comparisons to Du Hast, or comparisons like that. It doesn't sound like Du Hast, so we apologize for that in advance.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about this as well. But before we get there, I was driving in my car about an hour ago, and I was listening to something for the first time. And as it came on, and as I'm playing this new album, I'm saying to myself, this is one of them that Chris is going to enjoy, so I'd be remiss not to mention it up front. But there's a new debut album from a German symphonic metal band called Acanthus. The album is called Pay for Impressions, and what really kind of drew me to this at the outset was I heard a little bit of a Nightwish sound to it, especially some of the early Nightwish stuff, a little bit of a power metal tinge in spots, but definitely symphonic metal. And when I'm listening to this, I liked it. I have a feeling that you might love it. So I definitely want to post one of their songs this week. I don't hear anybody talking about this band. So this is going to be an interesting one for sure. But a band that a lot of people are talking about, and with good reason. The first single has dropped from the new Megadeth album, and this has apparently going to be their last release. The single was called Tipping Point. It is all the rage. Lots of positive comments about this song. I was wondering if you've had a chance to hear it yet in its entirety and kind of get your thoughts on this first single from their last album.
Nope, I haven't heard it yet. I am purchasing it from iTunes right now, and I will give it a listen. But I think everything I've heard said about it so far has been positive. So looking forward to checking that out, and I'm curious to see if this actually does end up being the last ride for Megadeth. Sometimes I just maybe it's the wrestling fan in me, but nobody seems to stay retired.
I was thinking the same thing as far as this song goes. Really solid riffs, nice production. It sounded full. It sounded powerful. The chorus was a little bit but at the same time, that if you're a fan of those thrash riffs, they're here, and it's definitely an enjoyable song. Dave sounded great, almost too good, and I wonder if they took the liberty of fixing some things in the studio, because I have a feeling it's not going to sound quite as crisp live, but at the same time, nice to hear new music from Megadeth. And if this is the farewell, we're off to a pretty good start with this album. I'm looking forward to hearing the full thing when it comes out.
Is that supposed to be out before the end of this year, or is that going to be a 26 release?
So that's a good question. I actually don't know. I'm going to find out now. I think the album is set to come out. Is it later this year? Let's see. Not sure. I'll circle back on that. But what I will say is an album that did just come out, an album that I have had for a while, but really dove into a lot over the last 2 weeks, is the new Amorphous album, Borderland. And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to listen to this. This is another example of a band that has stayed so consistent over the last 20, 25 years that you're never blown away by what it is, but it's so damn good that you enjoy it anyway. And I would say that this album is very much in line with their last 10 albums. Melodic, catchy, choruses that just kind of stick in your head, but enough going on that it stays interesting. And I've listened to this thing probably 5 or 6 times in the last 2 weeks, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Nice. Yes, I still have, in spite of the fact that I've had this album for months now, because the label sent us, I believe it was RPM Records, sent us the promo copy a while ago. I still haven't listened to it, nor have I listened to the new Primal Fear yet. So I still have some work to do, but I'll get there. This was a weird week for me. I kind of really just stuck to Rammstein, and had other stuff going on. Work was kind of slow, so I didn't spend a ton of time listening to music, although I did listen to the Pearl Jam's newest album on vinyl while I was making dinner the other night.
Nice.
It was nice to finally be able to just put on a record, and I had to stop what I was doing to turn the record over, which is such an odd sensation in 2025. But it now that the record player's out of storage and hooked up to the good speakers again, and we have our vinyl collection out and on display. So I thought that was a good. I'd purchased the album while I was living in the apartment and didn't have any means of playing it. So now that it's finally had a record player set up again, I thought it'd be a good idea to pop it on. So that was enjoyable. I don't know if I will be going out of my way to buying a lot of vinyl records going forward. I just find that it's the price point makes vinyl kind of inaccessible in my eyes, like having to spend $30 to $40 or even upwards towards $50 to buy an album is kind of just, it's not like a road I want to go down, because it just will become very expensive. But it's fun to if you go to a record shop and find something older, and that's just collecting dust, and you could get it for $6-7. I have a lot of albums like that, and so that's I think kind of fun. But when bands come out with new albums on vinyl, and it's $40 to start, and then you have to in a lot of cases pay to have it shipped overseas, and then you tack on the whole tariff situation. I feel like it's just not for me anyway. I don't have the additional funds that I want to take that on as a hobby. And I also don't really want to go down the road of paying for all of the equipment too, that when you start to get obsessed with sound and things. I know we there was a discussion in our metal podcast chat group that we're in, that just talking about the whole vinyl and how much equipment can end up costing, and it's just I'm good, I'm thankfully I'm not so much of an audiophile that I feel like I need to go down the $3,000 headphones route and all that, and I'm good where I am. But it can become a very expensive hobby, so not something I'm going down the road with. But I will say, getting to unpack all of my vinyls and all my CDs, it really does kind of give you that warm and fuzzy feeling of having physical media. I guess as somebody in my 40s, that's just something that I will always have nostalgia for. So it's cool. My CD collection over the last 15 years is mostly just CDs that happen to come with DVDs or Blu-rays. But it's nice to look and be holy crap, here's that copy of Gutter Ballet that I got at Roosevelt Field in 1997 or whatever. So I put all the DVDs in storage in the attic, but I busted out the old CD rack and put all the CDs back in. And so I have them on display in my bedroom, for just the sake of not having another box in the attic, and being able to kind of just see that there and enjoy it. So little sidebar there.
Nice. I've not gone down the vinyl rabbit hole myself, and I think the biggest reason is I rarely just sit in the house and have time to just listen to music. If I have it on in the background, that's great, but I'm not really just sitting there soaking it in. I listen to most of my music either during my commute or in the car where I'm going somewhere on a weekend or something like that. And so when you kind of put it all together, I just don't have the time for it. So in a sense, I have a good excuse not to go down that rabbit hole. I think I have become a little bit of an audiophile. So I started using like the high resolution streaming audio just because I do notice a significant difference with some of those providers. And that's good enough for me. It may not sound quite as good as the vinyl, but at the same time, again, you talk about good enough for me. I guess it is. And let's call it for what it is. A lot of the music that we listen to, not all of it, but a lot of it is recorded and produced in a way where you don't really need that high functioning clarity. No disrespect, but a band like Hammerfall, it doesn't have to sound any better than like the guitars, the bass, and the drums. It gets a little more complicated with some of the prog stuff and stuff like that, but for the most part, even the older albums, right? If I want to go back and I want to listen to Pink Floyd or Rush or King Crimson, you know, those recordings were done 50 or 60 years ago in certain respects. So like, it's only going to sound as good as the masters were back then anyway. So it's not going to ever sound better than, because it's not newly recorded material. That being said, I'm sure they've done wonders since then, but you know, it falls a little bit deaf on me. I'd be remiss not to mention the release of the new Megadeth album. It's going to be January 23rd, 2026. So it'll be out just after the new year. It's their self-titled release, and Tipping Point was the first single from that. So I just wanted to kind of close that loop and mention one other album that really has been kind of kicking my ass. It's the new Paradise Lost album, Ascension. I may have mentioned it some time ago on the podcast. If I didn't, I'm going to say it now. This is a band that's been around forever, 17 albums or something like that. But this is maybe the second or third one where I've really paid a lot of attention to it. And I keep going back to it a lot. So I don't know if it means I like it or if I'm waiting for the second half to kind of catch up to the first half or whatnot. But really interesting stuff. Kind of a nice blend of death doom, a little bit of prog, but not wildly inaccessible. So definitely worth checking out. And I recommend that people give that a listen. I'll try to post one of those tracks this week as well. But much like yourself, I spent the vast majority of the time this week listening to Rammstein. And I say that because I didn't even remember anything but Du Hast. And we were joking this week, and you mentioned, oh, there's that song like America. And then when you mentioned it to me, I remembered the song, and then I remembered saying to myself, and this is exactly why I never listened to the band, because I happen to hate that song. Like I do not like that song at all. And so I just never paid any attention to them. And this album that we covered, Mutter from 2001, April 2nd, 2001, was so much better than any of the stuff that I had heard from those two other songs. It's like incredible. I mean, it was obviously certain elements were there. There's no question about that. But it was almost like listening to a brand new band for the first time because it sounded nothing like I hated 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I feel like those two songs in particular are probably like their two big commercial hits. So it's definitely cool to dig into some of the deeper cuts and the deeper material, and you know, who better than Keith to recommend an album, because they are, as far as I know, his favorite band, and he is definitely, if I were to try to find a expert on Rammstein, he would be the one I would go to, and you'll see from his blurb just how passionate he is about this band. So yeah, I really didn't have any real expectations going into this. I really didn't know what to expect, and so it was really interesting, and it really makes me excited to dig into another one of their albums at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And I will apologize to Keith in advance that I'm sure I'm not going to be able to do this band justice because of the historian that he is and the amount of times he's seen them live and everything else. So I'm going to do my best. And I'll do my best with the pronunciations as well. But this was so much better than Saint Anger. I can't even begin to tell you. It's like night and day there. So I just wanted to kind of plug that in there. Had you been familiar with anything but those two or three songs, or is this basically the first time you've ever listened to one of their albums in its entirety?
This is definitely the first time I've ever listened to a full Rammstein album. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many other songs that I would know by them. Although, like I said last week, I feel like we probably would be surprised how many songs we do recognize, just because they are, I think, on the more popular side of the metal bands that we've talked about on this podcast. This is a band that routinely sells out arena shows in the U.S.
And stadium shows. A lot of time, I think they've played stadium shows in the country as well. They're massively popular both here and overseas. It's almost incredible, the cult-like following that this band has.
Yeah, although I don't even know if I would call it cult-like, because there's just so many fans that it kind of goes beyond culty. It's almost fair. Like they're a pretty mainstream metal band, as far as there's not a ton of them out there, but they're one of them. And I remember when I first heard about them selling out Madison Square Garden, I had no idea they were that big, and so I was very impressed by that. And then plus just the histrionics of the actual live performance, with all of the fireworks and all the visuals and stuff. My understanding is it's right up there with a Kiss or an Alice Cooper show, as far as just being a visually appealing event, not just music wise.
Having seen both Alice Cooper and Kiss, that is definitely part of the experience there. Sidebar, we haven't done a live album in a while, and one of the live albums that I was going to choose at some point was one of the Kiss Alive albums, because they're widely regarded as some of the best live albums that have ever existed. But I digress for a second. Both Alice Cooper and Kiss, known for their stage shows and for all the visuals that go along with what you're actually listening to, and by all accounts, Rammstein is the same exact thing in terms of just the presentation, and certainly putting a lot of money and energy into the live performance in addition to the music. So, it kind of, listening to them on the album, I think, is an impressive, interesting journey. But I can imagine seeing them live being a whole different experience, with the power and the fire and the just the histrionics of it all.
Yeah, 100%. I know Keith has gone to great lengths to see them throughout the world, not just in the US. And so he has probably lots of cool stories and stuff. I think I would, after listening to this album, it's definitely increased my desire to see this band live and just see what it's all about. Man, I feel like I'd have a lot of work to do as far as boning up on the full discography. This album, though, I think was a good start.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And just for context, again, this album is almost 25 years old. Features Tom Lindemann on vocals, Richard Crosby on lead guitars, Paul Landers on rhythm guitar, Christian Lawrence on keys, Oliver Rydell on bass, and Christoph Schneider on drums. An album that, by all accounts, is a little bit of a transitional album for them, and a little bit more exploratory, I think, than some of their prior releases. This is their third studio album. It came out, like I said, in 2001. The band formed in 1994, but was already on people's radar because of the Du Hast song that had come out about 4 years prior. So this was a bit of a household name by this point. And I think that bands often have a problem when they have massive success with a song or an album following up that kind of massive success. And so some people just go with the same formula, and it winds up being the same as. But, for others, it can be better than, less than, different than. And this, I think, was a little bit different than, in terms of the pantheon of what this was. This, and again, I can't say that I can have a great point of comparison because I didn't listen to all of their albums, but by all accounts, this album was a little more experimental. They kind of dipped their toe into some other waters, including the orchestration and stuff like that, which was playing a key role in a lot of these songs. And I, for the most part, as the prog fan, actually enjoyed that quite a bit. It wasn't as straightforward and repetitive as I expected it to be when I went in.
I think that's all very fair. And I have to agree with you. I thought there were two songs on the album that kind of reminded me a bit of that Du Hast, the style of Du Hast, but the rest of it, I thought really did a nice job of being very varied. And you mentioned the orchestrations. That was some of the stuff that I enjoyed the most, is just hearing things that aren't as straightforward industrial as like Du Hast was. It really opened my eyes to this band, and my ears, really, I should say. Just I always kind of saw them as one note, which is kind of easy when you only know one or two songs. And so, as per usual with the podcast, sometimes these requests are just really a great educational opportunity for me, especially to hear stuff that this is just one of those bands I just never really listened to. I know that like our friend Mike kind of had a thing for them at a time, or just the 19 different language versions of Du Hast. So this was definitely a cool experience, and Keith did provide us with some thoughts on why he chose it. I'll let you share those thoughts of his when you're ready.
Yeah,
he also was kind enough to send us the pronunciations of all of the German words, which is much appreciated.
I'm going to read his blurb now. I think it provides a nice intro to actually talking about the tracks themselves. He says, "This is the album where Rammstein found their creative wheelhouse and stuck to it. It is an evolution from electronic dance metal to a more orchestral and guitar-driven sound. Flake's work on the keyboards still shine here, of course, but this is their most complete album. The first 6 songs could all be Song of the Week. Spieler and Zwitter are also strong in their own rights. Rheinraus is the most underrated song on the album. Adios has a killer solo, and Nebel is a very brooding and mystical, as the name of the song implies. My song of the week would have to be Eichville, but I'm very iffy in saying that. This is among my favorite albums of all time, and Rammstein is my all-time favorite band, and anyone who has the chance to see them live must do so." So I think that's a nice kind of introductory piece to some of his favorite songs. And to his point, the first 6 songs on this 11-song album were all released as singles. The first 5 around the time of its release in 2001. And then another song released in 2012, which I thought was really interesting, that they would release a song as a single 10 years after the album, or 11 years after the album came out. Really interesting stuff, but I think it
was in support of a greatest hits album. I think that was the reason for it.
Oh, yeah, no, I know, but the fact is they still decided to go with this instead of something that was newer in the catalog. So I found that to be really interesting. But regardless, you're talking about half the album that's been released as a single. So I think it speaks to the strength of the album from top to bottom. And lastly, Rock Hard Magazine said it was one of the top 500 greatest rock and metal albums of all time, coming in at number 324. So obviously their popularity is there, but I think it was certainly time for us to cover them as well.
100%. I'd like to think we would have gotten to this at some point, but I think Keith definitely expedited the opening the box. So let's get into it.
Yeah, and to that end, that first single, or I should say that last single that came out as part of the Greatest Hits album, is the first track on the album, right? This album kicks off with Mein Herz brennt, which is apparently My Heart Burns, a 4-minute and 39-second track, which is one of the longest tracks on the album. What were your initial thoughts when you put this thing on? Because it has a bit of a slow build to it, but not only with the symphonic elements, but there's like a gothic tinge to it, which I kind of liked as well. But I'll give my thoughts in a second. But what are your thoughts on this opening tune?
Well, my first thought was, I know what Herz means because of Manowar's German version of Heart of Steel, which is Herz aus Stahl. So I was, right, get off to a good start. I recognized one German word right off the bat. I actually really, really like this song a lot, and the orchestral parts really took me by surprise because it wasn't something I was used to hearing from them. And again, I will repeat, my knowledge base was quite limited, but so much to the point where this is going to be my song of the week 2 weeks in a row, or I'm going with the opening track. But like, I just always look forward to starting up this album and hearing the song. Most of the album is going to maintain kind of a mid-tempo, almost kind of a marching kind of gait or tempo, and I think this song is not any different. But those orchestrations, I think, really put the song over the edge. I think it's a good song without it. The orchestrations, I think, make it a great song. It's in translation, it's about nightmares, basically. The opening line is translated to, "Now, dear children, pay attention. I have brought something for you," and that's taken from a German children's TV show called Mr. Sandman, or Sandmanchen in German. So interesting there. Also, I didn't know this, and would like to go back and listen to it. But the Swedish symphonic band Elaine did a cover version of this back in 2019. So I would like to hear their take on that, especially with a female vocalist versus the male vocalist on the original album. But I really like this song a lot, and it went down as like my favorite song on the album after listening to it a handful of times. And I had made mention last week that I had always kind of struggled with albums that are like 100% in a non-English language, and I found this to be not a huge issue with this album for whatever reason. And I think maybe it was because the translations were pretty easy to come by, but I don't know, it's almost as if like I couldn't picture like this band singing in a different language. Like, German just fits the style of the music, and so like it just, I don't know, it makes sense. So I will say, just as a small spoiler, I enjoyed this album on a whole a lot more than I thought I was going to. But just to kick it off, like, yeah, this first track was great. So let's give it a quick listen. This was Mein Herz brennt from the Mutter album from Rammstein, and we'll be back to discuss the rest.
Sie kommen zu euch in der Nacht. Dämonen, Geister, schwarze Feen. Sie kriechen aus dem Kellerschacht und werden unter euer Bettzeug sehen. Nun, liebe Kinder, geht fein Nacht. Ich bin die Stimme aus dem Kissen. Ich hab euch etwas mitgebracht. Ein heller Schein am Firmament. Mein Herz brennt. Mein Herz brennt. Sie kommen.
This was a good choice. I'm glad you picked it. And I think that what was interesting is that, knowing what I knew about the band, which was not much, I expected the guitars to kind of drive this entire song. But really, in many ways, it's the strings and the keys that play a very prominent role. And it was almost like the guitars took a back seat in a lot of this song. And I think that the verses have a bit of an alt-rock vibe, but that chorus was super catchy, surprisingly heavy, and I wound up just hearing new things every time I listened to it, and I actually wound up really enjoying this one myself. Not my song of the week, but a solid start. And then we move on to Links 234, which is heavy and kind of more of what I expected, I guess, from the band. I thought the verses had a Nine Inch Nails quality to them, and the pre-chorus almost sounded like a war march in and of itself. But the money here is, I think, in the guitar riff and the decent little guitar solo as well. I think that it's a good song that gets really good during the last minute. It kind of builds to a crescendo at the end. Not a bad song at all, but I did prefer the opening song. But that said, I understand why this was up front in terms of where it was placed, because there was something about it that just kind of belonged up front. I think it would have lost something if it was pushed at the bottom, the bottom half of the album.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It turns out that I actually knew this song going into the episode. I just didn't remember that I knew it. But my friend and our friend Caleb basically announced the birth of his first child using a video set to this song, which is, I think just like really interesting. And then looking back on it, when I went back and listened to it and he had reminded me of that, I was like, oh yeah, of course. This was one of the two songs I had mentioned earlier that kind of remind me of the Du Hast style, where it just has that, like you said, that kind of marching formation. And I mean, literally it's like left 2, 3, 4. It like literally makes sense. What I did not know is the meaning behind the song, because the band was actually accused of being Nazis back in the day. And this song was basically a reaction to that and kind of revealing that they're actually, or at least at the time, were politically left-wing. And so it was really interesting that they felt that they would write a song basically pointing that out. The chorus states in translation, "They want my heart on the right, but when I look down, it beats on the left."
Wow.
So interesting thing. The music video, depicted an ant colony of all things, representing leftists attacking beetles, representing Nazis. And the ants in the video are shown doing human-like tasks such as playing football, watching television, and dancing. So there's definitely there was a lot of thought put behind this song, and I think that adds a little bit more depth to the song itself, and I think it's kind of cool knowing that.
That's very interesting, but it suffers, I think, being sandwiched between that opening track, which we both obviously liked, and my song of the week, the third track, Sone. This song was the one that just knocked my socks off every time I listened to it. So I'm going to give some details, and I want to hear your thoughts after we've had a chance to listen. But this song has a real industrial vibe with a lot of sound effects that remind me of what a lot of the industrial metal bands were doing in the 1990s. Really solid riff. I think this is one of those songs that would be phenomenal live, and I could see the crowd just completely eating it up. It's got that blend of heavy and melodic, but these cool ambient effects which give it another layer above and beyond some of the stuff that it seems like they were doing on the first two albums. Verses are very solid, but an infectious chorus, even if I had no idea what it was about. It was just the melody was really catchy. And then some of the keyboards in the second half have a really spooky vibe and provide for a nice way to kind of go out with an outro that's cool as well. This one just spoke to me on another level. So I want to give it a listen, and we'll come back and hear your thoughts on Sone.
Alle warten auf das Licht. Fürchtet euch nicht. Die Sonne scheint mir aus den Augen. Sie wird heute Nacht nicht untergehen. Und die Welt zählt laut bis 10. Hier kommt die Sonne. 2. Hier kommt die Sonne. 3. Sie ist der hellste Stern von allen. 4. Hier kommt die Sonne. Die Sonne scheint.
And we're back. That was my song of the week, Sone. It means sun, quite literally in English. What are your thoughts on this third track?
This was one of my favorite tracks as well, especially the really kind of like eerie female vocals, which apparently were just from from Spectrasonic Symphony of Voices sample library. Like and it kind of makes sense because it does have kind of like an electronic, almost like non-human vibe to it. But I think it just adds this really cool creepiness to the song. And the song was actually originally written as an entrance song for Vitaly Klitschko, if you remember the boxer. And originally the name, his surname was the working title of the song until they went with Son or Sone in German. And it was also the first single from the album. There's a music video for it where the band is the Seven Dwarves and they're mining gold for Snow White. So interesting stuff there. I really like this song a lot, and again, I think it's those creepy female voice samples really, I think, add so much to the song and give it a real memorable quality to it. So great choice for Song of the Week. There were a handful of songs that I had pegged as potential Song of the Week candidates, and this was definitely one of them.
Nice. It's catchy, and I think that makes sense that they would make it the first single. The third single is actually the next track, and it happens to be another one that I liked a lot. It was called Eichville. This is a little bit of a slower, more deliberate pace to it, but the keyboards really jumped out to me. They're very simple, but they're very prominent. And a catchy bass line on this thing too, but it has an infectious build as the song progresses, where it almost layers on top of each other, which I thought was really well done. And yet it still has this subtle start and stop quality to it in spots, but then still manages to build. Really enjoy the guitar tone during the bridge. And then eventually it takes its foot off the gas just a little before kind of going out and heating up again. Solid, strong song construction. And I think that was part of what really kind of drew me to this track.
Yeah, I like this one a lot too. And like you said, those like industrial sounding keys, I think really make the song pop and really stand out. And I think that that's like that kind of sound that made me think of, like, you know, I don't think this song is a lot like Du Hast, but you hear that. I don't know. I'm sure there's like a name for it, or like something with the keyboard patch, just that sound. It's just, to me, it's just like Rammsteinian keyboard. Like, it just is very industrial. And again, this is another song that has that kind of like March-like quality to it. But this is another song that I really liked. And again, it's like each song I think is solid in its bass construction, but then there's like, each song has like a little something that I think really makes it unique and puts it over the top. And with the last one, it was like those female samples. And in this one, I think it's just that keyboard riff that you just hear repeated throughout the song, I think really kind of gives it this really unique sound. And another single, another music video. This one, the band is staging a bank robbery, and they made the video seem as realistic as possible. I feel like I need to like go and watch all of these music videos, because it sounds like there was a lot of thought and care put into them. And you know me, I love music videos, so I'll probably need to check this out. And there was an interview where the band described the video as being a demonstration of the media's obsession with a good story, as well as an illustration of the immortality that can be achieved by those who commit wrongs. So once again, like, a lot of thought being put into, you know, the music video to go along with the song. Ich will is translated to I want. And so, another really good tune. The first, I guess I'll ask you this, like, the very first time you listened to the album, how did it differ from like how you felt about it by the time you were done listening to it at the end of the week?
I don't think it was jarring the first listen, but I didn't fully appreciate it because, to your point, the basic song is what it is in a lot of the spots, but it was all these ambient or additional layers that they added on, which to me made the songs in many respects. And why I think I have a much better or fonder appreciation for this album than I do some of those singles that we talked about earlier from prior releases, because it had just another layer to it, which I really liked. So I liked it with each listen, and as I got more accustomed to what it was, I was hearing new things every time I listened to it, especially with headphones, just because there was so much going on. Whereas the first listen, and this is most often the case when I hear something new, I'm just trying to figure out what the hell I'm listening to, and then I can kind of hone in by that second or third listen.
Nice, yeah. I was like a little overwhelmed the first time I listened to it because I just felt like there was so much happening and I didn't even know where to like start with it. But as I kept listening to it, this is one of those examples of an album where I felt like each song really had its own personality, and so
which is so nice because sometimes they blend into each other so much. It's not, I don't enjoy that.
That's kind of how I felt last week. Even though as much as I enjoyed the album that we discussed by At the Gates, I just thought that like this album is more of an example of the songs standing out a little bit more and having a little bit more uniqueness from track to track.
There you go. I can appreciate that. The fifth track here is, and I'm going to butcher this, but I believe it's called Feuerfrei, or otherwise known as Open Fire, the fifth single from the album, and another tune which is a little bit on the short side, I guess. I really enjoyed the keys at the beginning. I think that the start of this tune might be the most intriguing start that we've had so far in terms of an intro. I felt like there was a lot of a nu metal quality to this. It reminded me of stuff that some of those bands were doing in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And I'm happy that the keys remain such a big part of this song. And I think the bass stood out here as well. I just didn't love the chorus. I found it to be a little repetitive. And I don't know that I think it hampered my enjoyment because I liked just about everything else about the song except for the chorus, but it was a little bit of a wild tune. It's kind of all over the place, but it's nice and short, so I don't think it overstays its welcome. It was just a little less than like the two songs that had come before it.
Yeah, it's probably my least favorite song on the album up to this point. That said, I think it's a nice departure from the mid-tempo marching kind of vibe, where this one has, I think, a little bit more of a faster pace to it. Apparently it's one of the band's most well-known songs and has been used in the film. I don't know if is it Triple X or XXX, the Vin Diesel series.
For a second I thought you were going in a completely different direction.
No, that's a different exchange. According to Wikipedia, it's pronounced Triple X. It's a film series starring Vin Diesel, but
I feel better.
It was also in an episode of CSI, so that's pretty cool. The title, I at first, before I was digging into like translations and stuff, I thought he was saying Firefly. So it turns out that it's actually a command to start shooting in German military language, literally fire freely, and can be compared to fire at will or open fire in English. And the single is a very eerie, just a gun being pointed directly at the person looking at the...
Yeah, that picture is something else.
Yeah, like, oh, okay, that's nothing like picking up an album and peeing yourself a little bit. But another cool song. Interesting fact, the video was directed by Rob Cohen, who also directed the film Triple X. And the video was released in the US on MTV to promote the film. And the video consists of the band playing on a fiery stage with several clips from the film. So again, another music video from the German industrial metal band, and we're gonna have one more track that was also a single before we oddly go to the second half of the album, which none of which were singles.
Really, I mean, I don't want to say they front loaded this thing, but Mutter, the title track, is the sixth track here. It's the fourth single that was released about a week or so before the album came out. This was another track that didn't stand out. I shouldn't say didn't stand out. I'd say that like the first time I heard it, this was one of the ones that I actually gravitated towards. I thought it might be my song of the week for a little while. It doesn't really start out with that heavy riff. It starts off more of like a ballad. It clearly has an emotion to it and it lacks levity. I think that it actually is just a really emotional song, and the vocals are really on point here, even when I didn't know what the song was about. But what was, I think, the oddest thing of all is that I consistently compared this to another German band who is not nearly as popular, and that was the band Rough Silk. Every time I heard this song, I kept hearing what Rough Silk was doing in the 1990s, which, you want to talk about a reference, I almost wonder if Rammstein, as another German band, knew what Rough Silk was doing, because that's how, like, linked I think these two sounds are. I like the slower, heavier, like dreamlike chorus. I thought they provided a nice contrast to the verses. And then the strings, again, just giving that extra dynamic here. Great song. I can see why they used it as a single. That makes complete sense to me. And I did find it interesting that after this, everything would just be, on the album and no more singles.
I was not expecting to hear a power ballad on this album, and this song proved me wrong. It's actually a song that is a reference to Till Lindemann and Richard Krusp's unhappy childhood relationships with their own mothers, and that's Mutter, or Mutter, literally means mother in German. And the lyrics tell a story of a child not born from a womb, but in an experiment, thus having no true father or mother. And the lyrics describe his plan to kill both the mother who never gave birth to him and then himself. However, he fails to kill himself, instead ending up mutilated and no better off than before. The child begs and prays for strength, but his dead mother does not answer. The narrative of the song is similar to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, in that the character takes revenge for his misfortunes on his parent, but ends up no different from before the parent, quote unquote, died. And that kind of brings me to the album art, which is of a dead fetus, which is really, if you thought the gun was off-putting, it's literally like a close-up of a face of a dead baby or dead fetus. And so I imagine that is probably linked to this song, being that is the title track. And there's a music video too, in which Till Lindemann portrays a monstrous character who kills his mother and then dumps her body in a river before ending up locked in an underground cage. And he's bald with clad in rags for the role, but also portrays a well-dressed character with long hair who is seen rowing a boat in a swamp. So 6 very interesting music videos that I believe we're going to have to check out. But,
talk about a power hour.
Yeah. Interesting tune with obviously a lot of emotion behind it. And I think that it's well placed on the album too, somewhere towards the middle, after some really heavy tunes on those first 5, especially with Fire Fry, which is like, I think the fastest paced song on the album up to this point. I think it's a nice dichotomy to kind of slow things down. And I think that the next track, the placement of this is really great too, because the track is, and I will defer to. Keith didn't send us a.
I know, Keith, you dropped the ball on what I think
I'm
is the hardest one to pronounce.
Spieler. I'm gonna go with Spieler. It means music box, and quite literally, the song starts out with a music box and some whispering, and I think it really is a perfect track to follow Mutter, because it starts out kind of, like almost ballad-like, but then it jumps back into the that mid-tempo kind of marching vibe. The drums kind of bring it back to where we were prior to the power ballad, and so now we're kind of back to that that kind of more classic sound for the album. I thought this was a really interesting track. What were your thoughts on this?
A couple of things stood out. That spoken word section in the beginning, the German always sounds angry, and I don't know that this is an angry tune per se, but obviously the language is just, it's not a romance language. I thought the song was very Nine Inch Nails sounding once again. Those two tracks, the one I mentioned earlier and this one, just gave me Nine Inch Nails vibes. The chorus features some what I'll call robotic vocals, almost sound effects with the use of the vocals. And I thought that was really memorable, even if I didn't particularly enjoy that sample. It's not my favorite track, but I admit it's a bit of an earworm, which is kind of interesting, but maybe it sticks in my head for the wrong reasons. I think that the keyboard patch in spots actually reminds me of a bit of a lullaby, and I thought that was cool. Not my favorite track, I want to say that, but it grew on me a lot. And so, what I hated it at first, by the end, I was like, all right, I kind of like it. And so I was all over the place with this one, but I found it to be a fascinating tune.
Yeah, this was one of my favorites, actually. And I think what really put it over the edge for me was those, again, the kind of creepy female vocals that almost feel electronic, but I think are actually credited to Kira Lee Lindemann, who I'll have to see what the relation is between her and Till. She's actually Richard Crusp's daughter. So that's interesting. I thought that with that music box melody kind of playing in the background the whole way through just made this like a really kind of, and I'm going to use this word probably a lot throughout this episode, but very haunting kind of, a haunting lullaby, I would call it.
Yeah, I think that's
I thought this was a super, super cool song. Like, I didn't think much of it until that chorus came in, and I was like, oh, this is cool. It's almost got like kind of a creepy video game kind of vibe to it. But this ended up being one of my favorite songs, and I toyed with making it my song of the week at one point.
Interesting. So I think we differ on this one a bit, but again, I have to say it grew on me. If you would have asked me when I first listened to it, it was nowhere in contention, but it grew on me a bit. Zwitter, the next track, is an interesting tune as well. The guitar tone is a little bit fuzzy, especially at the beginning, and it reminds me of like Motorhead and that like dirty guitar sound that they often employ. The verses are really more electronica than they are anything else. The pre-chorus is kind of repetitive. I didn't particularly love it, but there's samples that I kept hearing throughout this song that sounded different almost every time I heard them. The chorus itself, fantastic. One of my favorite on the album, and I think that it's hard for me to say exactly how I feel about this song because it's kind of a mixed bag. There's parts I love, parts I don't like, and when you put it all together, I'm still a little confused as to what Zwitter is, but there's enough here that I wouldn't skip it. It's not something I would skip. It's just I'm not going to say that it's my favorite song on the album.
I think I had mentioned earlier in the week that Zwitter was German Twitter, and you were like, really? And I was like, no, I don't think Twitter existed when this album came out, at least as far as I can remember. Not one of my favorite songs on the album. I'll say it's solid. Zwitter is translated to hermaphrodite. The translation's really interesting. I'll translate the very first verse. It's really interesting. It says, "I have stolen a kiss from her. She wanted to get it back. I have not let her go again. We melted into one piece. It is just too right for me. I am a beautiful bisexual, 2 souls under my chest, 2 genders, 1 lust." So, interesting. And like, I think it's so important to like read the translations for these songs because you really miss out on like what is the lyrical, purpose of these tracks. And so I feel like
I know you said it didn't bother you, but as I talk it through with you, I do think that there is something missing because I can't relate to the lyrics without the translation in front of me. So while I know it doesn't bother you and I can't say that it bothered me, I do feel like I'm missing something if I don't know what these songs are about. I can draw my own conclusions based on how the song is composed and the emotional attachment that I have to them, but I really have no idea what they're about unless, of course, you do the research and you kind of dig deeper.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I think in a lot of cases for me over the years, it's like I just didn't take the time for. I think of bands. Is there a Spanish power metal band? Is it Dark Sun? I'm
Yes.
trying to,
Yes.
like a band like that, a band
Or
like
Mago de
Mago
Oz.
Mago de Oz. I think if I took the time to sit down and really like dig into what the lyrics mean, it would probably change my thoughts on it. But a lot of times I'm just listening to music while I work and stuff. But, for the podcast and especially wanting to do justice to the album that Keith requested, I took a little more time than usual. I actually loaded in all of the original lyrics and translation into my iTunes tracks so I could pull them up while I'm listening to the song. And so I think that added. I think if I had just listened to the album and not really looked into the lyrics, I probably would have felt a little bit differently about it. I mean, you can enjoy it from a purely musical standpoint, but I feel like the band they're putting a lot of thought into their lyrics. They're putting a lot of thought into their music videos and stuff like that. So I think you're doing you would be doing a disservice to not really look into what it is they're singing about.
Yeah, I think that's exceptionally well said, and I definitely enjoyed it more when I started figuring out what what it was. I just suffer from that time thing where I don't, if this was 25 years ago, I'd be poring over every word. I'd be trying to find out what the inspiration is, etc. Those days and life, I guess, gets in the way, unfortunately. But that's why I have such fond, nostalgic memories of albums from the mid-'90s and the late '90s, because I had the time to comb over the lyrics and go on the internet and try to figure out what was Timo Tolkki talking about when he wrote Forever and things like that. Those days, unfortunately,
what was Timo Tolkki thinking when he wrote 030366?
Exactly. Well said. As we get to the next one, Rein Raus, which is the 9th track, In Out, another shorter tune, just over 3 minutes. This one, I think, more than any of them, probably employs that Du Hast formula. Nothing earth-shattering, but a really heavy riff that makes you move to the beat. It has a big song feel, and I would imagine that it's something that they played live. I was a little surprised that it wasn't a single, just because I felt like they could have gone back to that well and been fine. There's a lot of ideas that are kind of subtly crammed into this short song, and it has some very slick production, including a great display of strings towards the end. I actually like this song, and I think it was basically, again, Du Hast, but when you add in those string elements, I think it was enough to grab me.
Very, very fair. This was the other song that reminded me of Du Hast, so I'm glad that you mentioned it. Lyrically, absolutely, just very, very sexual. I mean, it literally, like you said, it translates to in out. And I mean, there's literally a verse that's translated as, I am the rider, you are the horse, I have the key, you have the lock, the door opens, I enter, life can be so splendorous. So, take that.
Are you sure it's not written by a locksmith or something like that? Are you sure that
no. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not. The last verse is phenomenal. It translates to, the ride was short, I am sorry, I climb off, I have no time, I must go now to the other horses, they also want to be ridden. So outstanding stuff. It makes me like the song all the more because it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek.
Can I switch my song? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So yeah, it's maybe the movie Triple X wasn't as X-rated as you had thought, but this song certainly is.
Fair enough. The other track that I had in contention for Song of the Week was Adios, the penultimate track. I love that acoustic guitar tone at the beginning. It's very mellow, and it kind of picks up nicely fairly quickly. But this song reminded me a lot of Volbeat. Some really cool drum fills. I like the tone or the sound of the drums. Kind of a toe-tapping melodic tune with some really cool instrumentation that starts about 2 minutes in. And then all of a sudden, there's like this kazoo meets guitar sound. I don't really know what the instrument was, but I kind of liked it. And again, this was another one that is a bit buried on the back end of the album, but the prog fan in me enjoyed it because it was a little weird.
The opening riff reminded me of Halloween, actually, like another German band. Probably more of like a B-side from like the mid-'90s, I would say. But then it goes into, you know, I think again, this was probably another one of the faster paced songs on the album, just because it's not that march, that kind of, you know, that like army-esque military march. Interesting lyrics. I can't tell if they're comparing drug use to music or music to drug use, because it literally is like, the translation is like, he lays the needle in the vein and he asks the music to come inside between his throat and forearm. The melody travels softly in the bones. Like, really interesting stuff. And the chorus is translated to, go, 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 nothing is for you, nothing was for you, nothing remains for you forever. So interesting. Also interesting that it's the one song that is, the title is in Spanish and not German, unless adios means goodbye in German also, which
it was
I don't
the one
think...
song I knew how to pronounce, so there's that.
Yeah,
I'm happy
there you
about
go.
that.
I thought the chorus was really cool. Just the pronunciation of the words in the chorus really make it pop. I mean, and I know that's just happenstance, but it's really cool. And then it goes into like that really cool guitar, like just a really cool track. This was one that I don't know that I ever had it pegged as like a song of the week, but it was a song I always enjoyed when it would come on.
I loved it. I really did. And then we get to Nebel, which is kind of a little bit of an odd closer. It's hard to characterize. I think it's definitely dripping with emotion, as some of these other tracks were, but it's really an interesting use of not only percussion, but just electronic music in general. And the use of the strings, again, make it quite proggy. I thought it was a really good vocal performance as well. It just, I don't know, it feels like a closer, but at the same time, a little odd for me, but I didn't dislike it. It was just kind of a weird way to go out.
Yeah, it's, I think, like, if you dig into the lyrics, it kind of makes a little bit more sense, because it's kind of, it translates to mist, and it's kind of like, the song kind of tells the story of, like, somebody literally, like, dying in their lover's arms, and so, like, it has this very emotional kind of vibe to it. I guess if you really consider the hidden track, Hallelujah, like, as it was put on the original album, and I don't know that it was necessarily meant as like a bonus track. It was just, this was a time where a lot of bands were doing hidden tracks. But I like this as the last like four-hole track on the on the album, just because it's another, it kind of, along with Mutter, has like a very musically emotional vibe to it, along with the actual lyrics as well. Literally, the last kiss was so long ago, the last kiss, he does not remember it anymore. It's very, like, if you look at the translation, it's a very emotional song. And so, I feel like you could kind of take it two different ways. You could look at it as like, somebody saying goodbye to somebody passing away, like a lover passing away, or also just a breakup, just saying goodbye to somebody in a breakup, if you want to look at it as a little bit less final. I feel like this is, I don't know that this song would have fit anywhere else on the album other than at the very end. And it's cool, because like, I don't think I would have guessed that a Rammstein album would end in such a ballady sort of way. But sure enough, like, there were two like bona fide power ballads on this album, and this was one of them.
Yeah, well said. Did you listen to Alleluia, that bonus secret track, or did you not listen to that?
I did, and I thought it was quite good. I think it would have fit on the album if they just stuck it somewhere else on the album. It would have fit. I don't think it was like an outlier or anything like that.
It was an odd blend to me, because it had this spooky but edgy vibe with like a touch of K-pop. I didn't know what was going on here, but it was an interesting track. And if my streaming service didn't have it, I don't know that I would have ever known it existed.
Again, the like creepy female vocals, or maybe not creepy, but like haunting, really, I think, take the song over the edge, where you hear that Hallelujah like singing in the background. Really cool. It looks like the Japanese edition had Hallelujah as a hidden track found after Nebel, after a 2-minute intermission of silence, and the track was later included in the Resident Evil soundtrack, even though it does not appear in the film, which is really interesting. There's a limited edition that has a second CD with just the track Hallelujah and a CD-ROM. Remember that when an album would come with a CD-ROM, you'd pop it into your computer, there'd be a music video, and in this case, the Sane,
usually a wallpaper for your computer and stuff.
It was
like
cool. That. I remember that Luca Turilli. I probably forgot to mention this, and if I did, I apologize. When we talked about Ancient Forest of Elves, I had the disc where you popped it in, and you could actually watch the. That wasn't the name of the album. The album was. Prophets of the Last Eclipse, I think, or was that the second one? I don't know. I don't know. I'm dying here. But the song "Ancient Forest of Elves," the video was on the CD-ROM, which was kind of cool. And in this case, the Sane video was included with the Mutter limited edition version. And a small little detail: the Hallelujah is not supposed to have an H at the end. It was mislabeled on some versions of the album, but it's actually Hallelujah without the H. I don't know if that's just the German translation, but another note, some copies that have Hallelujah as a hidden track cannot be played for unknown reasons. And on April 3rd, 2010, Rammstein posted a video with an official translation of Hallelujah on their Facebook, quote, "in light of recent events." I don't remember what the recent events would have been at that time, but interesting track, and kind of glad that it was included in the version of the album that I had, because I think that it doesn't necessarily, I don't know that it necessarily would be like the obvious choice as the last track on the album. I think it would have fit elsewhere on the album, but I think it was a cool song.
Nice. I do think it was an interesting thing that people were doing at this time, and it certainly was enjoyable enough. I'm curious to hear your score from 1 to 10 on this. I will speak for myself first. I'll say that when I went into this, I had no idea. I knew I was going to like it more than Saint Anger. So that I knew we were in better shape to begin with, but I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. So much so that I am going to make a commitment to going to see this band live at some point when they come to the area. Like, I feel like it would be just a cool experience, even if I don't know 90% of the set list. For me, it's a 6.75. It was a solid above average release, and again, trending in the right direction, something that I would like to check out more of. I don't know that I'll ever go back to those first two albums, but it seemed like the band has progressed since then in a direction that I enjoy. So 6.75 for me, but a band that I really want to check out live.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one just shy of an 8. I'm going to give it a 7.875. Nice. I just enjoyed this way more than I was expecting to, and I'm sure with the benefit of time and seeing the band live and stuff, like this is one of those things where I feel like the score definitely could grow over time. But I'm so glad that Keith requested this, because I really enjoyed my first foray into listening to a full Rammstein album. Mutter, I think, was a great choice, and I would imagine Keith will probably request another one before we just pick one at random. And so at that point, I look forward to discussing it with you. I think they're a really interesting band, and this really opened my eyes and ears to why they have such a wide popularity throughout the world compared to many other metal bands that we've discussed on this podcast.
Very good. Very good. Just a few quick news items before you reveal your album for next week. I had mentioned Nine Inch Nails a couple of times during this podcast, so I'd be remiss not to announce their new tour, February and March of next year, doing a run of U.S. dates, starting February 5th in New Orleans, ending March 16th out in California, Sacramento to be exact. So a band that has a following that has not declined over the years. Nine Inch Nails remains as popular as ever, doing arenas, playing arenas every time that they do a tour. So good luck to them on that tour. And a gentleman who I will be seeing very, very soon, and I'll report back on that, Mr. Jeff Tate has announced that he is just days away from releasing the first single from the upcoming Operation Mindcrime 3 album. I hope it's better than the second one. This one is through the eyes of Dr. X instead of the protagonist. So I'm really curious, scared. I don't know what you want to call it, but I'll give that single a listen, and I will go enjoy Mindcrime for all that it is a little later this month. So just a little bit of news items on that front. Curious to hear what our what our album of the week is next month. I know it's something that you've had planned for a while. So what are we listening to?
Yeah, this actually kind of turned into something else that I had planned, and it's going to turn into a Metal Exchange double, or an Exchange double, if you will. But we're going to do both albums in the same week. And the only reason I say that is because the total length of the two albums combined is still shorter than The Edge by Eternity X. So,
okay.
That should give you a hint as to what band we're talking about based on that. But the band is a band we've only discussed once, and we're going to go back and talk about them again. And the band is Green Day. And the reason that I chose these albums is because they both are celebrating pretty big anniversaries, literally a week apart. Insomniac, which came out in 1995, was released on October 10th. So this week, or this month, it will be celebrating its Gulp 30th anniversary. Warning, which was released in 2000, was released on October 3rd, and so that will be celebrating its 20th anniversary. The reason I chose both of these albums, not just because of the timing, it's also because they happen to be two of my all-time favorite Green Day albums, and I think two of the most underappreciated Green Day albums. So hopefully I'm not asking too much in choosing two albums in the same week, but I feel like you're probably pretty familiar with both, and it's, again, less than 80 minutes to listen to both albums. Insomniac literally clocks in at under 33 minutes total. So,
and I have a good story about that album in particular, because I have a fond memory of purchasing that album, and I also have a fond memory of purchasing The Warning as well. So I've got some stories that are timely given these choices, and we'll do an unplanned Metal Exchange double when we cover both albums next week.
Yeah, I mean, I had Insomniac on the schedule for months, and it was just a couple of days ago that I popped on Warning, and then all of a sudden I started to think about what time of year it was when I bought the album, and I'm like, this album must have come out right around the same time. And when I looked it up, it was literally, days apart, 5 years later. So I was like, what the hell? Like, we can handle both of these. We'll be skipping Nimrod, which came out in between those two in 1997. And that's an album I definitely would like to go back to and talk about, because that album kind of brought me back to being a Green Day fan after kind of losing interest. I mean, back then it was literally 2 years. Like at the time, that 2 years felt like a long time, but to lose interest in a band for 2 years, I actually have our friend Nick to thank. He was the one who let me borrow his copy of Nimrod and was like, you have to listen to this whole album. It's not just Time of Your Life. There's like a lot of good stuff going on here. So yeah, I definitely actually have stories about purchasing both of these albums as well. So looking forward to going back to Green Day. I'm sure much to some of the listeners' chagrin, but they are one of my all-time favorite bands, and one of the bands that was really integral in my love of music in the early days, especially before I started becoming a metal fan. So I
have an album picked out for the following week, and I assure you It is a metal album, so we'll be back on track in that regard. But I look forward to covering these. I know them well. It won't take a ton of prep for me, but at the same token, I look forward to going back and listening to them because it's been a while. So look forward to that. Thank you to everyone for giving us a listen. If it's your first time, welcome. Consider joining our Patreon. We really appreciate our supporters there. They make all of this possible, so thank you to them. Give us a like and a follow if you think we deserve it, and we will come back and let the good times roll as we march on and coming to a close with 2025 and looking ahead to 2026. Anything else on your end, my friend?
No, I think I'm good. This was really fun. I ended up enjoying both this and the At the Gate Slaughter of the Soul album that we talked about the previous week a lot more than I thought I was going to. And so, two albums I wasn't familiar with that now I'm pretty glad that I am. So, good stuff. And don't worry, I have a actual metal album planned for the end of October, as well. And then we'll hit up our friend Rich for a request in November. And then I have an album in November that is definitely not a metal album that I'm looking forward to discussing with you. And I believe that's another anniversary as well. So lots of good stuff to look forward to. October, always fun. I love the fall. It's my favorite season of the year. Starting to cool down a little bit, and I have such fond memories of buying Green Day albums in October. So I look forward to discussing that with you next week.
Nice. Enjoy the week, my friend. We will talk soon.
All right. Take care, buddy.